Welcome to the latest edition of the Celtics Rundown live stream right here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I am thrilled to welcome on. It's his first time. It's his show debut, but he is still a good friend of the program, someone I know quite well. He is John Ryan, a sports handicapper, and pound for pound, I will put him up against your favorite sports handicapper and fully expect to find my way into the winner's circle. He is one of the best. I call him a walking bucket all the time. It doesn't matter the sport. Today, we're, of course, doing a deep dive into the Celtics-Magic opening round series for the postseason, and we're going to talk everything from his favorite prop bets and what he likes from an individual player perspective to the spread for game one, betting the series, and some tools that will help you that perhaps you can apply to Celtics-Magic and any other series you might be interested in sprinkling some pizza money on. So, John, why don't you tell people who aren't familiar with your background a little bit about what it is that has allowed you to become so successful?
Well, I think, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Hopefully this will be the first of many. We've done probably close to 100, you and I, for the career. Yeah. So this is always one of my favorite times with you, especially now that the Celtics are in position to defend that world championship. And it wouldn't be the first time since the 60s that the Celtics have gone back-to-back. I'll say right now, I think they are the team that's going to do it. The Oklahoma City Thunder is probably on a collision course with them, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out in the West. But my background is Wall Street. I was an institutional trader. I had a career as a chief currency strategist. I was one of those talking heads you saw on CNBC and Bloomberg back in the 90s. And, I've moved on with what I've learned from that. When sports betting was going to be legalized, I realized there's a lot of similarities between the way Wall Street works and recently these huge moves we've seen in the Dow Jones Industrial Average related to the tariffs. And what fascinates me, Bobby, as you know, is sentiment. We get wildly bullish at the tops. There's no fear. It's all greed. And suddenly a top is made in those conditions. Conversely, now everybody's scared to death of the market. You tell somebody you just bought something, and they look at you like, you're missing your head. And those mark the times that you have bottoms. So these swings in sentiment also apply in the sports betting markets. For example, in the NBA and the NFL, all sports, we get teams that have maybe 70% or more of the tickets being bet, and the handle is equally as robust. And those plays generally have a tendency to lose more than they win. And it's definitely a red flag. Situations where you have the betting public with a percentage of 70 tickets bet and say only 30% of the handle, meaning the money bet, those are red flags because that means that it's being dominated by the little guy bet. We want to be associated with people that have reason to bet 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 on a game, because those people, they're either really rich and dumb, which most people are that rich, they had to be smart to get there in the first place. And we want to be kind of trailing those kind of market moves. So that's what led me into this. It got legalized, and then I realized that there is a tremendous need for education in this, and I don't have all the answers. I learn from people every single day of my life, and that is another reason why I've been successful, because I keep my mouth shut once in a while, Bobby, but it seems like I'm talking a lot now. But that's really what the analytics are. A lot of the algorithms that I developed, building models, the only difference between Wall Street and the NBA databases is the column names. It's field goal attempts, field goal percentage, free throws, what have you, and then all the advanced analytics like defensive efficiency and effective field goal percentage. But that's the only difference. The formulas of my algorithms are exactly the same that give me the buy and sell signals when I do my trading in the market.
It's so cool that you were able to combine passion with the skill set that you had sharpened on Wall Street and blend the two into what makes you such a unique perspective for sports handicapping, because you have these algorithms that were applied so effectively in one avenue. And now I've certainly seen firsthand how it works for you in a sports handicapping field where, we talked Olympic swimming and you were a walking bucket. And so for everyone here, you're the guy they want to hear from today on this live stream, John. You're the one whose bets they want to tail. And I think pretty quickly just now from that introduction that the buy-in should be there. And if it's not, I'm telling you, I can't even, it's an endless list of people from different audiences, from Sports Map Radio Network to Believe and on down the line, where we've talked about, hey, what's John's outlook on a particular game? And then people ultimately come away reaping the profits of your advice. So to our viewers today, I'm telling you, listen to his advice, including on what it means to bet just some pizza money, right? That's always a word of caution from you, is don't bet more than you can afford to lose. So with caution, with responsibility, tail John's picks here, because I'm very confident his track record speaks for itself. No one has 100% hit rate, but John is as good as you're going to find in the sports handicapping field.
Thanks very much for that, Bob. It means a lot. And, like you said, we don't win them all. There will be times where we lose 6, 7, even 8, I think happened one year, a couple years ago in the NHL. That happens, but the whole key is that you forget about that the next day. It's almost like being a baseball player with a short memory. You might have struck out 5 times in a row, but if you go up to the plate thinking you're going to strike out again, or you fear that you might again, you probably will. And that separates the best in the world from some of the ones that don't make it to the Major League Baseball level. And the same thing applies in all of sports. McIlroy wouldn't have won the Masters if he was worried about losing. Even though he went through a microcosm of the last 14 years of his life, that was one of the most incredible rounds I have ever seen, in a display of resiliency. So I think that's the most important thing. You can't get ahead of yourself if you want a big bet, or not necessarily a large bet monetarily, but if you're on a win streak of 5 or 6, resist the temptation to think you're invincible, because those betting guys, and I learned this on Wall Street, they'll humble you real fast. And that part's not fun. So you just want to stay even keeled and bet with your head and never over it. And it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun diving into John's favorite bets for this round 1 series between the Celtics and the Magic. John, the first thing that I go to look at in the series, and starting with game 1 here, and it jumps out to me, so I'm curious to get your take on it. The spread for game 1 Sunday afternoon at TD Garden is 13.5, of course, in favor of the Celtics. Do you like that line? Do you feel like it's a bit too generous towards Boston? What's your advice for people looking to bet the spread?
Well, the fact of the matter is, double-digit favorites with a total of 220 or fewer points, which since 2017 has become kind of the average, pace of play, so to speak. Those favorites have gone 24-5 straight up, 17-10 with 2 pushes. That's 63% winners. But note that there's 5 losses of a double-digit favorite. So even though this matchup to me, and I think you would agree, Bobby, is a monumental mismatch. Boston has the number 2 offensive efficiency in the league this year. They broke the record for made 3-pointers. They're the first team in the history of the 3-point shot, which is 46 years now, that averaged 53% of their shots taken from beyond the arc. It spreads a defense when they are healthy, which they are, and it makes it very tough. Even though the Magic play a slow pace and are very good defensively, they don't have the offense to stay up point for point, because they do rank second to last in offensive efficiency. So there's a glaring disparity here. The one thing I can tell you is that these are pro athletes and pro teams, and this is the playoffs. So what my recommendation is, I am on the Celtics here in game 1. I also put some pizza money on them to sweep the series. Now there's this kind of a caveat with that. Jaylen Brown is having that he's still nursing that knee injury, I believe. Bobby, you would know better than I. So if they get up 2-0 or even 3-0, they may choose to rest him or other players, knowing that they have the series wrapped up and that the goal is to win the world championship. Not that they're throwing a game to the Magic and taking a chance of losing it. If you're up 3-0 in the NBA, it's not like the Red Sox and the Yankees so far, but it would be unimaginable for the Magic to think or even see them win 2 games in this series. So at plus 200 pizza money, Celtics sweep them 4-0, I think is very attractive. I was surprised that it actually was plus money. I was thinking maybe it would be pick 'em. So I think there's some value in that. Double-digit home favorites in the playoffs period are 39-11 straight up and just 23-24, 3 pushes against the spread since 2017, which that season is very important, Bobby, because that was the beginning of the meteoric rise in scoring in the NBA. So I'm very careful with the algorithms to make sure that we're dissecting the data by year, like era. So we're in what I would call the higher scoring era. Back in the 90s, we had games that were played in the 70s with the Miami Heat.
Those a lot of rock fights.
Yeah. And, this series is not going to be like that one with Kevin Garnett and Dwight Howard, if you remember that little fisticuffs thing. That was a very physical series. There's going to be points scored, but the total here is 205.5. So what I'm recommending to clients is the models are on the Celtics here in game 1 at 13.5. Nobody says you have to bet all your money before the game starts. There's live betting. And in the NBA, this is where the Wall Street trading experience that I've accumulated really, really works pretty well. And again, I emphasize it doesn't work all the time. But one of the things I'm going to look for is I'm going to put 70% down the Celtics pre-flop, meaning before the game starts. I'm going to take 3 10% bets. So if I'm doing $100, $70 before the game, and then $10 3 times, any point where the Magic score 10 unanswered points. Though usually is a timeout. You have time to get the bet in. And those have proven to be very, very good because scoring volatility since 2017 has gone up. And we have a team that's fully capable, even though they're one of the worst offensive teams. They can still score 10 in a row against the Celtics or anybody. And when those happen, that's when you really, really get the juicy value on that favorite. And I do think another strategy, Bobby, would be to do 70% pre-flop. And then during the first half, if the line gets down to 9.5 or lower, that's when you add the 30%. Once you have the 100% done, then it's done. And I can't emphasize that enough. You don't then add another 10% just because the Magic ripped off 10 points in a row or because the line dropped to 6.5. You go with a strategy before the game starts, because if you don't have the strategy before the game starts, that's a surefire recipe to lose some money. So that is how I'm going to play it. I also think the total here is very hard to play the under. Just psychologically, 205 in this day and age, and the Boston Celtics. I mean, that seems like an automatic over. And it also feels like the over is going to win by, a lot. I don't know how to describe it. It's one of these sentiment things where people are going to be betting the over. The betting flows so far have been on the over. That the Celtics are just going to blow them off the court. And you know what, Bobby? They might score 130 in this game. And at that point, then the Magic don't even have to score barely 75 points for it to play over. Again, the live betting. I would say on the total, don't bet it. If you like the under, don't bet it before the game starts. See how the game starts. First quarters can be a little bit of a feeling out period where both teams are going to be able to score. Maybe the defense isn't that intense yet, like a playoff atmosphere. And that usually occurs in the beginning of the third quarter, generally speaking. So I do think that if you saw the total in-game at 215 or higher, pizza money, if your pizza costs $20 where you live, don't do more than that. Just, okay, 215, I like the under. This is 10 points better than I could have gotten. Let's give it a shot. So I think the volatility in all this series in the NBA are going to be significant for in-game betting success, and especially this one.
Yeah, live betting and in-game betting has become so popular now, even among the sharps, but you were early to the party on that. And hey, come in with a plan, read how the game is going, and then react accordingly and see what's available to you and what's a value play worth making and what isn't as well. So that certainly is another area, John, where you were ahead of the curve and is really smart advice for how to go to this game from a betting perspective, and also just anyone that you might have an interest in sprinkling some pizza money on in general, regardless of sport. From a basketball perspective, I'll add a few things here. One regarding Jaylen Brown's knee, because that might give people trepidation. Right now, the Celtics, for example, they put out a a few clips from practice recently, and Jaylen Brown looks pretty good. And from Joe Mazzulla to Brown's teammates, they've been telling us that he's moving well out there. He's gone through practice and looked good. So I'm not particularly concerned going into this series between the Magic, which might influence how people want to bet on this series and certain options that are available to them on the robust menu of betting. But at the same time, from a long-term perspective, Donovan Mitchell, obviously a different build than Jaylen Brown, but he dealt with a similar knee injury last season, and the timeline for when he had that pain management injection was comparable to when Brown received his. And Mitchell looked great in round 1 last year and ultimately had to bow out during round 2 against the Celtics. So my concern for Brown is more so as the playoffs go on compared to this particular series. And then with Orlando and that defense, on one hand, their starting front court of Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Wendell Carter Jr., they're each 6'10". They're very physical defenders. So they have size, length, and physicality going for them. And what they rely on, because they struggle so much to score points in the half court. They're one of the lowest scoring offenses in the NBA, not just among playoff teams, but they rank 27th in the regular season in points per game. So they rely on forcing turnovers and getting to the free throw line and that defense to win the war of attrition for them and force opponents into mental mistakes and giveaways. So for the Celtics, if you can combat that, then you're in really good shape. And where John's talking about, boy, it's hard to believe that game 1, these two teams come out and don't eclipse 205 points. He's absolutely right. Of course, no surprise there, John. And so you look at it and the Celtics just have so many options to be able to do the heavy lifting, whether it's, for instance, the range that Kristaps Porzingis provides as a three-point shooter. So yes, the Magic do a great job limiting opponents, and they did hold the Celtics to their lowest three-point attempts in a game this season at 33, and another one of their top 5 fewest production rates in that category at 37. But at the same time, they don't have Jalen Suggs anymore, a massive blow to, in particular, their perimeter defense. And I look at the tail of the tape here, and Orlando, where that offense, John, sometimes it looks like they're stuck in the 90s, where it's a rock fight, and you don't want to put too much stock into one game. But the Celtics played a lot of their backups in the most recent meeting with the Magic in Orlando on the second half of the back-to-back for Boston. Orlando had all of their guys besides Mo Wagner, who's not this massive scoring machine. He's not Wilt Chamberlain out there. And Orlando only put up 96 points. Now, again, you don't want to put too much stock into it. And you can say, well, they understood who their competition was that night, who was and wasn't on the floor. And that might have impacted the mentality that ultimately influenced why they reached 96 points and not triple digits. It still speaks to an offense that does not shoot the ball well. And that's going to give the Celtics a lot of transition opportunities to produce points. And why I'm with you, John. I think the Celtics will do the heavy lifting. I think ultimately that what worries me more than anything else with the spread, because I'm with you, I totally think that the total here goes over 205. What worries me about the spread is if the end of the game, the outcome's already decided, and all of a sudden things go where the Magic are shooting better, but it's not influencing the outcome. It's just impacting the spread. So that's where it might be a hold your breath situation for anyone who has a ticket on that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that analysis. Great analysis. The backdoor cover does happen, and that's part of doing sports betting. You can have the correct bet, and it sometimes just doesn't work out. And that's why I like looking to buy dips on the Celtics. Almost like we're buying dips on the Nvidia stock or Apple Computer, and anything under 10 during that first half of action is attractive to me. And then that gives you a chance to ward off that backdoor cover a little bit, because in those covers, you generally lose by a couple of points when you're up by 20. And that can be very frustrating. So, I think the biggest matchup I see here, Bobby, just to extend what you were talking about, is it's not necessarily the Magic's ability to contain their three-point shooting of the Celtics. Where I see the greatest gap in talent and execution is Boston's Celtics defense can really clamp down on a very weak offense. So to think that Orlando is going to score 100 in this game, I think is a big reach. And if I was going to bet the team total, I would bet under the team total in the Magic. And you have a better pulse of what style of play they're more than likely to play in this game one. But it wouldn't surprise me if the Celtics, in transition, didn't necessarily run fast breaks and use the clock, because I was thinking that, that if you have the ball possession, most like in football, that can really control things and limit an already weak offensive team from even scoring an average amount of points on their standards. So it may get to certain points of the game where they're like literally playing in the mud, and it does have a slight resemblance to the 1990s, but nowhere close to that. But you understand what I'm saying. I think that is the biggest matchup advantage the Celtics have, and I don't see how the Magic can overcome it. I really don't.
Yeah, it's funny because neither one of these are up-tempo teams. So you talk about what the pace might look like, and you're exactly right there. And even with the Celtics, even if the Magic are in this cycle of misses and Boston's stringing together stops and turnovers, if the points are there in transition, you take them. But more than anything, it's about using pace as an advantage to create the highest possible shot quality. And so for the Celtics, it might be that those misses lead to really favorable outcomes in a half-court setting because the Magic aren't able to set up their defense, and you're a step ahead. And so now you can all of a sudden create a mismatch, and ultimately someone pops open on a drive and kick for a three, for instance. And so that's how you can attack the strength of the Magic, which is their three-point defense, by exploiting their weaknesses, which really start at the offensive end for Orlando. I'm curious now, John, as we dive into some of the other bets here regarding, we'll start with just game one on Sunday, whether it's player props, you take this in any direction you want, those bets that really catch your eye and you say, hey, here's what I'm looking at that I highly recommend.
Well, I will say this, generally speaking, when you get into the playoffs in any sport, the individual over-unders for points scored, receiving yards, rushing yards, whatever it is, they get inflated. And the reason is that we all like to bet the over. The public loves to bet the over, especially with their team. So it's naturally going to be a tendency to think that Tatum is going to score and score a lot. And in this case, I actually think that the market has overshot it a little bit, but I still like a lot of the bets involving Tatum specifically because he had done very, very well, small sample size, obviously, but he averaged 30 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 46% shooting. That was against Orlando this year, and he scored 26 in a blowout win where he didn't even play the whole game or play his minutes. I think he was at 28 minutes in that game. And then another analytic, the player impact estimate, he has one at 18.2, which is very, very good. And then that is monumentally better than Bangura's 14.5. So Tatum has like a two-way dominance over anybody that covers him. Whether it's the same guy on defense or the same guy when he has the ball, he's going to dominate whoever is there. And I do see him having a really big series. There is one bet that he scores 25 or more points in each game of the series. That's 11-1. And that to me is kind of tempting because if you think it's going to be a sweep and you already have a pizza money bet on the 2-1 odds that it is going to be a sweep, getting plus money, you're adding a little bit of fuel to the fire here, which you're adding risk on the same kind of outcome. But I do think that is worth maybe a half a pizza. And then I would take the other half just in case this happens, Bobby, because this is, you don't have to hit many of these to be highly successful. So it's very unlikely that he's going to score 30 or more in every single game. But are you going to bet against him doing that? As good as he is, as great as he's become as a player now, I can't do that. And the books at ESPN are paying you 70-1. So you take a $10 bet and suddenly that happens, it's 700 in your till. So much like the stock market, you can play puts and options. You can invest very, very little that has tremendous leverage. And you only have to hit one or two of those out of every 50 trades. And that was what the movie The Big Short was all about. Those younger guys took small amounts of risk in a steady, disciplined fashion until something major happened. And that's what the movie is based on. So don't rule those out. I think they are worth taking a shot. The PGA Tour has had many winners the past 3 years of 50-1, 70-1, even 100-1 odds. So that wouldn't surprise me to see Tatum do 30 points every single game, even if it does go 5. So that's what I'm thinking there in the player props. I don't have too many other player props because I try to limit the risk. Obviously, if I always recommend this in the Super Bowl. I might play 7 or 8 prop bets, but then that's it. Because the more you do, if, like, for example, we're on the Celtics in Game 1, and all our prop bets are on Tatum and Jaylen Brown and other players on Boston, you're essentially, leveraging the risk of the bet. You're almost better off not doing the player props and just, okay, I'm going to bet a little bit more than I normally do on the Celtics. Because you're going to end up probably with a better chance of winning money doing fewer bets than trying to load up on all kinds of prop bets. And, another thing I would recommend is it's fun to do those parlays. Every once in a while I do one. And you know what? I rarely win them, Bobby. I think, well, okay, well, that was close. You get 3 out of the 4 legs and one doesn't come through. And, stay away from those. It'd be better to do 4 individual bets and go 3-1 or go 4-0 and say, boy, I wish I would have done the parlay. But you're going to come out ahead over the course of a playoff season.
Yeah, rather than seeing everything go up in smoke, sometimes just take the wins as they come and make these bets in a vacuum rather than combining them. Certainly understood why the temptation exists and why people might do it anyways. But listen to John's advice because it's worked quite well for quite a while for quite a lot of people. And including right there your advice on, well, I don't love player prop bets, and I try to be particularly disciplined with those. Even when it comes to the Super Bowl, when people will go crazy with them, you're more of a stay the course and trust the approach that has worked so well for you, understandably so. So I think it's worth people really listening to John's outlook on player prop bets. There are just a few things that I look at here because you brought up Tatum. I'm looking on FanDuel Sportsbook right now, and there's some stuff that, again, where you talked about that over-under at 205 feels generous to the better. Tatum on FanDuel, just to get a double-double, is plus 110. So, John, I like that a lot, and I'll go even further. Too. Yeah, I think that's pretty juicy and feels like they're doing us a solid there and throwing us a bone. And I think the same is probably ultimately true for Tatum to record 40-plus points, rebounds, and assists combined. So it's not he has to score 40 points. It's you factor in the rebounds and the assists too, and he's minus 106. So that, to me, is something that you tell me your outlook, but I also think that's worth people sprinkling some pizza money on.
Absolutely. I agree with every single one of those. The PRA, as they call it, the points, rebounds, assists, might be the better way to go with Tatum because we've seen him not look to score in some games and distribute to his teammates, which makes it even harder for the Magic to defend. They're just too talented. You have Horford that can make threes. It's just endless. It's relentless pressure on a defense. So it would make sense to me to see, maybe I didn't see any bet for a triple-double for Tatum. He doesn't get all that many. But again, it's got to be juicy odds because it's not likely to happen. But who's to say he can't do it? Like, it just seems like the perfect storm for him to just have a huge series.
Well, so this is a great one for you, John, right here, because looking on FanDuel right now, Tatum to record a triple-double is plus 1,600. Do you like that, just given what the odds are, or do you still tell people it's just not worth it?
It may appear not worth it, but I mean, for $5, $7, $10 at those kind of odds,
worth it to
why
me.
not?
Yeah, you're the expert. You're the one who people should be tailing and taking the advice of. But plus 1,600, like you said, $5. I mean, if you can afford to do so, the risk reward ratio is certainly in the favor of the better on that one. Yep. So that's an eye opener as well, John. There's one other going into game 1 on Sunday that I want to get your take on, because Orlando, as we've talked about, what they do best is protect the perimeter and limit opponents' 3-point attempts and makes. Their opponents ranked last in the league compared to everyone else in both those categories, 3-point attempts and makes. But when we look at some of these individuals, and we know how Boston's offense operates, to make at least 4 threes on Sunday. You have Jason Tatum at plus 164. You have Derek White at plus 162. And you have Kristaps Porzingis at plus 330 to make at least 4 threes. Do you like any of those and say, well, these are high volume shooters that tend to be prolific from beyond the arc, and I would ride with 1, 2, 3 of them? Or do you say, it's just not my cup of tea?
I think Derek White's the one that stands out there because his odds are almost the same as Tatum. And that's the market is telling me there that, why is that in the first place? Because Tatum is such a much better shooter than White, but Derek White is very good in his own right. He's not Jason Tatum, though. So the fact that they are relatively close and even leans me right away to take a look at White. It'd be very tempting to do both Tatum and White. The only thing holding me back on that is that, the Magic do have an ability to stop three-point shooting teams. I believe, Bobby, they rank second in allowed three-pointer attempts. But then you can offset that too because the interior defense was weak enough that teams exploited that and didn't shoot as many threes as they normally do because they had that advantage. Again, it just seems like it's 4.5, right? Over 3-pointers made.
It's just 4+.
4+. So 4 or more. So 4 is a winner. Wow. I mean, that just seems really likely to happen. I can definitely see both White. I can see all 3 of them getting that. You obviously can't bet all 3 of them, but again, you can. You could, and they all could win, and also they could all lose. And with that said, when something looks really, really attractive, make sure that when you're putting these bets together, that you're not creating a large amount of risk, because to think that not one of them will get 4 3-pointer made is almost unimaginable. But you know what? It can happen, and these situations have happened. So I'm being a little cautious here just to try to emphasize that, don't go into a bet, even if it's pizza money, and think, oh my goodness, this is free money. The books are wrong. I'm right. And a lot of times you find out that the market is right. The books are not trying to trick us. They want equal action on both sides. That's another thing that I really emphasize with people. You'll hear shows where, especially in the NFL, Vegas is trying to trick us, Bobby. That line looks funny. They could care less. It's just like the market makers in the stock market. When they open up Apple Computer every morning, they want to identify a price that provides stability, where they have mostly equal buyers and sellers in terms of number and dollar amount. And there is absolutely nothing different in the sports betting market. An excellent lines maker, like we saw in the Super Bowl, where the line is -3 and it doesn't move, that is so ideal for a sports book. And they truly do not care who wins because they take 10% of the total handle. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But don't ever assume that, wow, this is the Celtics and they're the reigning world champs, and Porzingis, White, and Tatum are going to combine for 12 3-pointers or more. That's not automatic. At the same time, I think if you do it intelligently and responsibly, I would do Tatum and White to win that bet.
Yeah, well said. I like those. And to be honest, I like Porzingis too because of his size and the range that he shoots from so far back, that not only do teams tend to just live with it, but even if you go all the way out there to contest him, he's 7'2" and he shoots from over his head. So you're only doing so much to impact the outcome there, even if you meet him. So Porzingis I'm pulling it up right now again, plus 330 on FanDuel Sportsbook to make at least 4 threes. I could certainly see that one coming to fruition too. So to me, there's a lot to work with here. John has given you everything from what he likes on the over-under front to the spread and the total and individual player prop bets. Plus, most importantly, John, I would say is your strategies and your approaches to betting, whether it's in-game, whether it's going into a particular matchup beforehand. And like you said, of course, have a plan, have a strategy, because if you don't and you're flying by the seat of your pants, so to speak, that's how you tend to end up losing.
I can't agree more. And if we have time, Bob, I'm just going to mention one quick betting algorithm that supports the Celtics. Since 2021, this betting algorithm has produced a highly profitable 26-4 straight up and against the spread. That's good for 80% winning bets. It doesn't mean that it's going to win in this game one, but probability is pretty high here. Boston's in an excellent situation to win against the spread. You bet on home favorites that are coming off 3 consecutive games, allowing no more than 105 points in each of those 3 games, and facing an opponent that scored 120 or more points in their last game. Very simple, straightforward. That has gone 24-6 for 80%, and that's why I really like the Celtics in game one and for the sweep.
Folks, that's why I call them a walking bucket. 80% hit rate on a type of wager that you're probably not going to get from other sports handicappers. Pound for pound, John Ryan is as good as anyone, and I firmly and confidently stand on that. His results and track record speaks for itself in this business. John, thank you for the time, for the insight, for helping people to be able to reap the profits by tailing your picks. And so right now, I want to give you the floor to promote anything you want, whether it's your social media handles to let people know where to find you on there, any work you've got out, anything you want to let people know about and be made aware of. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Bobby, for having me on the show, and just love doing these shows with you. I learn a lot from you, and that's what makes a good show, in my opinion. And I do have subscriptions. We've tried to lower the prices, make it affordable for everybody, because the goal is to provide education. I think you see from this show that you are getting some high-powered analytics that have stood the test of time, and many of my algorithms have never had a losing season in 10 or even a couple of them are 20 years. It doesn't mean that they're going to keep winning, but it stands to reason that these algorithms really work well together and will produce profits over the course of a season. So if you have a long-term vision and you're not looking just for a weekend big score, then I might be the guy to check out. You can find me on the X at John Ryan Sports and the number 1. And I provide my stock trades there, fully transparent, even showing my account and the trade tickets, and the same thing with the betting market. So try to be as honest as I possibly can with the results and being real about trading and gambling, because it involves a tremendous amount of risk. And taking this risk may not be for everybody either. I get that. But if you want to have some fun, I think I'm a guy that can create that for you, and let's see what we can do together.
Yeah, I certainly recommend taking John up on those offers. At a minimum, follow him on social media, but also his customers and his clientele, believe me, they're quite thrilled to fall into that category and be able to have access to his picks, his advice, and his recommendations. He is John Ryan, one of the best. I am Bobby Krivitsky, just merely your host here over at the Celtics Rundown live stream on 5 Reasons Sports Network. And that concludes today's episode.